and welcome. Today we're going to talk about the SQ3R reading strategy. SQ3R reading strategy breaks down to survey, question, read, respond, review. Those are the steps, and that's what SQ3R stands for. Survey, when we talk about survey, what we mean is to look over the text and consider anything that jumps out at you. This could come from cover art of a book, the title, any reviews you may see, the little blurbs of text on the back or inside the cover, publication date, is this really old, is it from a year ago, chapter titles, any of the text, scan, have a look, and you're just going to think. This is just getting curious about the text. At the end of the day, this is what successful readers do. You walk into a bookshop or the library, you're thinking about what's in front of you. What have you learned? What are you curious about? You're going to want to write those down as questions, which actually gets us to the question part of the SQ3R reading strategy. This isn't brain science here. It's all pretty straightforward. And then, what might the book be about? What's it going to feature? What's going to have in it? What's it going to speak to or struggle with? Are you noticing anything? Do you have any questions? Write those down as sentences, as questions, but get organized and do this in a purposeful way. And you can do it in the text itself as purposeful annotation. One of the things I notice about student annotation is, and this is, this reminds me of my university studies when you would buy used books and they would just be plastered in yellow highlighter. If you highlight everything, if everything is most important, nothing is most important. So this is just a way to start discriminating as we read. I've gone to this website at openculture.com. So I have chosen Mr. F. Scott Fitzgerald, and I clicked on his collected stories HTML link, and here's a bunch of his stories. I have chosen A Night at the Fair, which I've never read by him. You can see that's the title, author, when and where it was published. I'm just going to scan over A Night at the Fair. Well, as I look at this, I see chauffeurs. I see there's two towns. They're at a fair. And, because I am informed about Scott Fitzgerald, I am guessing there's going to be something about like a class conflict or struggle in here. So I'm just going to write that down. So now I'm going to question. I can write these questions down in the text, inside the cover, in separate notes, and this is just your curiosity and recording your curiosity. If there's chapter titles, if you get stuck, you can always turn those into questions. If you have plot or action questions like why did X happen? Why did Joey jump off the bridge? Write them down. If you have meaning questions, why did the narrator say that? Couldn't the car have been a carriage? Why was the wedding portrayed that way? Write those down too. This is struggling with inference. I saw the text, I understood the text. What does that text mean? How does that advance meaning in the book as a whole or the piece as a whole? That's great. We want to be there, but these questions are totally fair too. So this is where I start in my questioning process. So I've written a few questions just right here on this short story, and you can find the link at the bottom of the page if you're on the Metonymy instructional videos page. Otherwise, you can just go to Open Culture and find this story at F. Scott Fitzgerald's Collected Stories. But I'm wondering, night at the fair, so is this just leisure? Is it work? I think of my own experience at agricultural county fairs growing up. Is that going to be similar? We tend to bring our own personal experiences to bear in the way we read text. Is it a date night? Is it a night out? Someone trying to impress somebody else? Boy, girl? F. Scott Fitzgerald, I've read plenty of him. Will this deal with social class? Is that going to be a major theme? So often it is with him. Conflict and setting. There's two cities. They're separated by a thin, well-bridged river. So this is the setting. And if you actually look here, it says, under the jealous eye of each lay every fall the state fair. So the fair is sort of between the cities. And because of the agricultural eminence of the state, well, that makes me think, okay, fair. But I wonder, is there going to be a conflict here that has to do with the setting? Already jealousy is in the first sentence. And is there a relationship between the conflict and the setting? This is probably enough questions for now to get started with. I want to make sure that I come back to those, though. And as we go back to what the SQ3R is, I question, and then I read. That's pretty straightforward. I read carefully, closely. I don't just rush to finish. And then I'm going to come back to these questions and respond. As I read, as questions happen, I'm going to write them down. As I read and questions change, I'm going to go back and revise them. Then I'm going to, and it's really cyclical. It's not really a bulleted list. I'm going to do a lot of time kind of bouncing between these zones of question and response as I read. As new information changes my understanding, I reflect that by revising questions, answering them, writing new questions, okay? And that is what we're going to do now. So I'm going to read and respond. Keep in mind, it's a cycle. So I wondered about the setting and conflict, and I don't have to wait very long to find out. We get introduced in the second paragraph to two boys of 15. One is taller, or shorter, but appears taller because he's wearing short trousers, and the other one is in long trousers. This is having a disrupting influence on their friendship. Talks here about sort of the liberation from short trousers and how it feels as though you're no longer a boy or restrained. Here, though, we learn we have Basil Duke Lee and Ripley Buckner Jr. Basil is going east to school. These are probably wealthy kids. This paragraph is just beautiful writing, but it talks about how they're just feeling a drive to do something that they're not sure about, and they need a change. No sooner do they think that as they see a red sports car, small car, red in color and slung at that proximity to the ground, which indicated both speed of motion and speed of life. A Blatt's Wildcat, how all these boys wanted it. And it is a beautiful blonde girl. They kind of, they spend some time staring, and out comes a young man who fires up the car and pulls away. So this is what I've read so far. If we go back to my questions, well, we've got some answers. It is, in fact, not a date night. It's two friends, two 15-year-old friends, and there's a tension or conflict around maturity, as there so often is. Was it deal with social cost? Not sure yet. Is there a relationship between conflict and setting? I'm not entirely sure yet, but there's clearly two things, right? These friends are in some sort of conflict, but then there's this object of desire. Who knows? I need to keep reading, but I've got information here. What other questions do I have? Well, what's the role of the car, the girl? Will she come back? Will something happen there? Is this about growing up? Lots of questions. Now I've put my questions into a more formalized list. These will be a guide as I read to help me focus on things that are important in the story. So as I read, things I've noticed here, for example, when Ripley and Basil get into a bit of a disagreement over the attention of a girl, Basil's being mocked by Ripley for not having pants. Basil says to Ripley, "Where'd you get the pants? Where'd you get the pants? From your father. You think you're so big." There's something about pants and growing up here. Both the boys are missing their fathers. And then later, there's this interesting narrative exposition that deals with the tradition that boys are obsessed with the idea of being grown. And, yesterday Basil didn't care about pants. Now it's the most important necessity in his life. He's been mocked, and now he cares about having pants. So something's going on here, and I need to look further into it. So now, as I read, I have these questions. Additionally, new questions get created. Here's a question that's essential to meaning. This question is going to, I think, wind up being pretty important. If something gets repeated as much as this pants thing, it's going to wind up having something to do with the greater ideas, the themes in the text. So I keep reading. Eventually, we'll see here in the bottom, he gets his pants, his uncle takes him. He feels bad about the expense, but on the way home, he's feeling pretty sweet. He's got his pants, and in front of his friend's house, he sees this high fire hydrant that he doesn't think he'll be able to leap over in long trousers, so he leaps it 2 or 3 times as a sort of ceremonial farewell. Truly, Basil is a boy inside. This is important, though. He's got his pants, and I still wonder, is it going to matter that he's got his pants? Is he now really a man? I think that's a pretty important question. So I read on, and eventually they're back at it again, trying to pick up girls at the fair the next day. And here Hubert Blair is introduced. Hubert Blair is the exact opposite of Basil. He's got flair, he's popular, all the ladies love him. He's got the appearance, he seems to have the confidence. Basil feels like the gig is up here, and he ducks out to go watch the fireworks with his one of his rich friends, a young lady. And as they're talking, they're so excited. He says, talk about going to school in the East, maybe on the same train. I can hardly wait, he says. I've got on long pants. He even buys the same rattan cane that Hubert Blair has. He has a sense of appearance, and he's trying to play the part of a man. So I have to go back and respond, and I'm going to you're going to see me cyclically come back to another question. Yes, he does get the pants. They come late. He's super upset when that happens. Then he's really excited because they show up just in the nick of time. I have another question based on this answer, which is, why is Basil so interested in appearing like a man? Notice I'm not saying becoming a man. This seems to be more about appearances. But I read on, and if we flash forward to the end of the short story, you see this moment where his friend has asked him to come over tomorrow. He's feeling all right. He's not really attracted to her. In fact, we see that she has a vague, unexciting quality, a lack of beauty, but she does have fine luxury and exquisite delicacy. So now I come back to my questions, and there's something about social class going on here. But when she asked him to come over, she ends with saying, "Will you bring that Hubert Blair?" The last line is so pat. When the car had driven off, Basil stood looking after it thoughtfully until it turned the corner of the street. And, oh man, it's just, you can feel his balloon get punctured right there. Deeply ironic. And I have a series of new questions now. What is Basil thinking about now? Why didn't he get the girl? What is the problem with Basil? And what does Hubert have that Basil lacks? These are real questions. I think they're going to get us to the meaning of the story. So, the end of the story gives me more information. Now it's time to look at relationships between questions. I can do all kinds of things. If something doesn't make sense, go back and try to draw connections. But at the end of the day, these are my big questions. Now what I want to do is come back to my list of questions and revise any questions that aren't really specific, that I don't still have answers for. Try to answer questions. And I may still have more questions. For example, in the red here, this is a revision of this question about the girl. It's really more about the girl in the car, although certainly wealth and the girl seem to be the ideal. In the green here, this happens. Wealth makes Gladys more attractive to Basil. But so I have this question: what does he want more? What's the relationship between love, wealth, and manhood? As a man myself, an American man, I have a sense of this, and I can certainly start answering these questions based on my own experience, and I think that's what art and literature ask us to do. I'm not doing that just yet here. The relationship between the setting and the conflict, it doesn't seem that important. Mostly it's setting a mood, and that's used throughout, and I can identify that. Something is going on here with this wealth, love, appearing like a man, being a man. That is where the theme of the piece lies. Probably what I should do next is spend a little time journaling, spend a little time writing about what my understanding is. You can talk to your folks, your friends, start a Facebook page, talk about the text. Whatever, really, the idea here is to do some thinking and do it in a semi-structured, sort of formal way. Now I go back, I respond, this is this cycle. And my last step really is to review. Look over what I've done and just spend a few minutes thinking. Now in reviewing, my job is to look back over the questions and answers, the text, consolidate my understanding. This is what I'm talking about, journaling, really thinking about this. This is a pretty good start. I've uncovered important questions. I'm talking about meaning, I'm inferring, I'm actively reading. SQ3R is an active reading strategy. If I was you and I was looking to really learn this strategy, I may go read the story, think about how I would use the strategy myself, try it, compare. How are your questions similar or different from mine? How is what we're noticing similar or different? Have that experience, and I think you'll be ready to go on longer pieces and really use this strategy to understand text.